We welcome you to this day in Columbus, Ohio, in September. That is like July. Can you believe this weather? Isn't it beautiful? And my daughter just called from St. Louis, and we're going to St. Louis for a celebration. And she said, Mom, be sure you wear summer clothes. It's going to be 90 and 93. So happy days of what was called always the Indian summer. And we are into it and celebrating art, a true gift to the city of Columbus. And we have with us Jesus. Now you say your last name, Walle.
Yes.
Ah. Jesus was saying to me, he is from the Latino community. His parents were Mexican and moved. Actually, they were called to move to northern, let's see, it was Nashville.
Yes.
Nashville, Tennessee, because relatives were setting up a restaurant chain. So they come from Mexico to Nashville. And is this where you were born, Jesus?
It was, yeah. I was born over in Nashville, Tennessee. And just like Ellen was saying, my parents were called up to do, to help out with a restaurant chain that one of our relatives owns and still owns to this day. So my parents kind of acted as the trainers for these restaurants, and so anytime the restaurant was planning on opening a new location, my parents would kind of go ahead and ahead of that town and get all the workers together and do. I'm assuming they would do some of the hiring process as well. So in that hiring process, they would also do a lot of the back of house training, whether that's like cooking, and like sanitation and dishwashing and all that stuff, to food prep, and then also teaching front of house situations like being a waiter, waitress, doing cashier operations.
You got to witness that growing up, huh?
Yes.
And I was sharing with Jesus, we just came back from New Mexico with a family wedding celebration. And every time we would go to a Mexican restaurant, I just wanted to order guacamole and chips. Somebody said, wouldn't you like a main entree? No, I just wanted guacamole and chips. Delicious food. And thank you for bringing to your family, thank you for bringing your culture to our United States from Mexico. What a courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
And then, as you were growing up in southern Illinois, mainly.
Yeah. So there was grew up in a small town, probably about 5,000 people. So we had a Walmart. That was our big thing. And anyway, so I grew up there the majority of my life. I did spend 2 years over in Mexico to actually go to school over there. So I was kind of back and forth a little bit. But for the most part, I spent my time over in Carmi, Illinois, and a lot of the values that I have come from that place. And so now it's, I'm here in Columbus. I came over here for art school, and Columbus is perfect for me just because of, there's enough energy and creative energy here. And also just the city is interesting in and of itself. And there's just a lot of lively people here.
And you went to Columbus College of Art and Design, and Jesus was telling me that for some time he was deciding what he wanted to do, because he didn't want to go into sports as such, and he loved to just work quietly by himself and create things. So he goes to art school, loves it. And is that where you met Randy? Randy, your wife, right?
Yes.
All right, Randy, stand up here. How wonderful. In meeting a friend at CCAD who then introduced you to Randy.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And then next month, on October 4th, will be our 3-year anniversary. So.
A round of applause for 3 years. Wow. And in the meantime, you're creating these emojis. How creative in itself, as you were saying to me, showing me your exhibit out there, the evolution of this emoji came about because you thought, well, usually this is a very isolating thing, but you want to make a statement with these. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so
And they are behind
yeah,
us.
and they're actually projected behind us. So this is, I call them Latino Emoji. And part of that is because I wanted to have them reflect my experience of my Mexican heritage and upbringing. So these are a lot of items that I've chosen that I particularly have had a lot of experiences with. And this project came about because of just technology and just I had some frustrations, but I also saw an opportunity for something new. Within, I'm sure some of you have used emoji in some form or fashion, but even just being able to text a simple smiley face, or whether you're sending a few hearts or something, these mean something to you. And it's very much in the same fashion that I wanted to create things that meant something to me. And out of my own personal experiences, I really saw an opportunity for like a universal experience for those of the same culture, or even those that just love Mexican culture.
Can you give us an example of any one or two of those?
Yeah. So, for example, if you look at the second one, the Vicks Vapor Rub. So that is a very common, even here in America, like Vicks is pretty common, in its use. Essentially what ended up happening with that and why I chose that one is because they basically, for lack of an expression, essentially if you are, if you have a headache or if your arm is chopped off or, you get hit by a car, just put Vicks on it, it'll be fine. Mexicans treat that as like their cure-all, and, if you died because you didn't put Vicks on. And then we also, let's see.
What's the rose?
The top right, that is actually, it's a little candy. So I noticed too that while I was doing this is my first round of Latino Emoji, but I noticed that I was doing a lot of candy because it's something that I really enjoyed growing up. So yeah, the top one, it's like a little, like, how do I say, it's like a peanut cake, and it's like a little tiny, like, I don't know, probably, can't really think of a good size reference at the moment, but essentially it's like compacted peanut, and it's the whole it's very honorable if you can actually unwrap it and not break it, because it's very brittle, and so that's kind of like the hallmark achievement if you can do that. And then I wonder if this just needs to move for a second. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right, so
But we are left with a lingering taste of that. Delicious, huh?
yes. And then there's other things that are very, that are also just like signature items within Mexican culture. Like you have, if you look on the fourth row, on the fourth column, you have this like little, it's called a concha, and it's the one that has like the arching lines, like the dotted lines kind of thing. So it's right by the cilantro one, the cilantro leaves. That is actually called a concha, which is a type of pan dulce, which is just Mexican bread. Within the culture, it's anytime that you go to a Mexican bakery, like those are probably the easiest ones to spot and to see. He knows.
my wife is part Mexican, so I know the Corona and the hot sauce.
Yes.
Those are two of my favorite things.
Yes. Yeah, we have the Corona, which has obviously made its impact here in America, and also the hot salsa, which is Valentina. That is made over in the state of Jalisco. So that's what that like mark that's on the middle of its like label. That's what that state is, or that's what that image is.
And the candle there in the middle,
Yeah. Let me see if I
That's
can
right
clear
from
that up a little
Mexico.
bit.
Is that the Guadalupe?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
There we go. So yeah, the candle in the middle is the Lady of Guadalupe. So anytime you go to a family member's house, they usually have some kind of this tall candle. It isn't always the Lady of Guadalupe, but it's usually her or some kind of saint or Jesus or, you know, something that's very that's associated with the Catholic and Christian faith. And so I used to see those literally everywhere. And if it's not on a candle, it's on a calendar or it's on some kind of big, like, illuminated picture with a frame that has lights on it and everything.
Well, you brought that here to the Cultural Arts Center. We were just amazed that we had a Mass of Our Lady of Guadalupe here in the last month, out in the courtyard. And your singing, your culture was just such an artistic and spiritual gift. So thank you for that tradition.
Yeah. And that's something that is just a very strong presence in Mexico. Like, it's just part of the cultural identity that it's very hard to actually, even if you have people that are not believers of the faith, they would still find comfort in those items just as a cultural identification. So
You
even
know
if,
who just said that recently? Okay, this is amazing, as you're saying that. Recently, in terms of her coming back, Georgia O'Keeffe, having died in 1986, she was 99 years old, and I visited the place where she lived a couple weeks ago.
oh, okay.
And as Abiquiu, New Mexico. And one of the remarks she made in the book I'm reading about her is exactly what you said. She kind of gazed at it, enjoyed it. The people living next door in the St. Thomas Church, and said it was like seeing the rest of the world. So that's a beautiful culture that you share with us.
Yeah. And let's see, I'm trying to think of what else.
What's the yellow one next to the cornmeal?
The yellow one is actually a mango.
Ah.
Part of the reason why I chose a mango is because a lot of food that they have there, they incorporate mango with it. A lot of candy has mango, which is another. It's not something that I particularly have noticed here in America, but a lot of the combinations that they use for candy is mango, and they usually have some kind of chili powder and lime that's added to it. And so if you're not used to that kind of, if you're not used to that flavor, it can be a very jarring experience for some.
What's the one next to the Corona?
That is actually it's called Duvalin, and it's like a condensed milk candy. And if you see right under it, there's like a little like white spoon like object. So the way that this candy is sold is you have the little packet of it, and then you also they give you a spoon with it so that you can actually scoop it out. If you don't have the spoon, then you don't really have the full experience on that. What else are you guys wanting to ask on?
Is that like a Mardi Gras, those masks? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So the one on the left is actually El Santo, which is a very famous, iconic Mexican luchador. he actually, when he was buried with his mask on, which is just how like serious like Mexicans take their professional wrestling is, and I'm sure that they had like this whole like ceremony with all the other like luchadores that knew him and knew his family and stuff like that. But yeah, he did die with his mask on, and that was by his request. So that was part of the culture that I learned about, not super early in my childhood, but I would say more in my teenage years. I learned more about lucha libre and that whole culture of professional wrestling. And then the black one right next to it is actually from a show called Sábado Gigante. So there's this, it's like a variety show, and it was hosted by this man named Don Francisco. And it was usually on this channel called Univision, which is, and I'm sure some of you have at least heard it at some point. So what the variety show was is that they would have famous people talk on it, and they would have a bunch of games leading up to the talk. But anyway, they would also have competitions. And so they would have the singing competition that the show was actually really famous for. And they would have random people from the audience participate in singing. And so when there was a contestant that was terrible, this guy would come out. It almost looked like an executioner because he was clothed with black from head to toe, and he would come out with this trumpet. And once you heard the tune of the trumpet, it knew you were done, because that was his way of saying, "We're cutting you off. That's over." What else do you guys have questions on?
What is just a third one in the top row, the round yellow?
Oh, that one is actually a lime wheel. A lime wheel, like a sliver of lime. Yeah, it's a little hard to see on the projector over here, but so I put that one because of just how prominent the lime taste is in a lot of food. And if it's not in the food, then they definitely have a lot of lime slices for you to put on your food.
I thought it was for the crowd.
That's it.
What's the one below it?
The one below it is a little packet of it's a pack of gum, but they're called they're cannels, or very similar to like chiclets. You see those a lot over in culture. Yeah, and yeah, even here in America, that type of gum is still kind of popular. Yes.
And the glass that's next to this under the mask, that would be full of watermelon juice with it.
Oh, so this bottom one
Yeah.
that has the right by the nopales.
Yeah.
So that one is actually a mangonada, which is like it's a frozen mango blended beverage. And then the red stuff that's above it and below it is I'm identifying that as like chamoy, which is chamoy is very interesting because everybody makes it totally different. But it's made from salt, some kind of like chili powder, usually lime is thrown in there, and it's a mixture of that and fermented like prunes or like nectarines, or peaches. Everybody has their own mixture of how they do it, so no one like chamoy like recipe is quite the same. So everybody tries to make their like own signature flavor for it.
I thought that yellow one, looks like a wheel, was the lemon thing, or.
Oh, that one down there, right by the candle and the sandal. So that one is a chicharrón, and what that is, so there's two types. You have like the real chicharrón, which is like fried up like pig intestines, which are delicious. And then you also have this one, which is the harina version or the flour version. So it's just deep fried flour and it puffs up. And usually they put a lot of the salsa de Medina that was up there earlier, and they also put lime on it as well. Yes.
Can you get that drink at La Mexicana,
Um,
the grocery stores?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm sure that at some places they would have it. I know that there's a place over on Cleveland Avenue that just opened up somewhat recently called Mi Dulce Vida, and it's over by the, let's see, it's over by like the Turkey Hill on Cleveland Avenue, so it's like kind of like north of Morris.
Morris, yeah.
So it's a Mexican Nieveria, like ice cream shop, and they also sell like fresh water and popsicles and ice cream and all that stuff over there. But I know they for sure make it.
What's it called again?
Mango Nada.
MANGO.
Yeah, so just so it's the word mango, and then the added is like
limonada.
N-A, yeah, kind of like that.
Where's the hot chocolate?
The hot chocolate is actually in my next series of it, which so my projected amount of these is to have 80 of them. This is just the first 20. And so I've already got the second set finished. I just have to write up descriptions and start releasing them on social media. And my idea is that once I get the full projected 80 finished, is to get an estimate from an app developer, whether it's like a freelance person or a developer agency, get an estimate on what it would take to actually make it into a keyboard that you can download on your smartphone. And then in terms of how to go about it, I could either do some kind of crowdfunding campaign and have people put money towards it and then they would get it, or I would somehow do that and then either charge for it to go on like on Android and like iOS or like the Apple Store. So my idea is to make them, put them on those services and then have people download them so that they can, even though I have my own context and my own experience with these objects, as you send emojis to your friends or your family, you create your own context. And very much like, I was telling Ellen earlier that language is a very fluid thing. And so we have words that, people have held on to that eventually go away. And then we have new words that come back or are created. And then we have, even older words that somehow come back into the vocabulary, like tablet and, whatever else, scrolling, things like that. But with the Latino Emoji, I really wanted to, give new context to things that I'm familiar with and that, people from Mexican culture are familiar with. And so as you, send your emojis, as you couple them with different things, they create different meanings. And so very much, I'm letting people know that like these things are important, but I want you to create your own experiences with them as well. Yes.
How, if you were to put these on, website or whatever, how do you imagine people using them?
I would imagine people using them, even just in regular everyday conversation. So if you wanted to text your son or daughter or your sister or somebody that or a friend that you went to school with, and you said, hey, you want to meet me for for tacos, and then there's an emoji for tacos. I mean, they have one now, but I would create my own version of what that would be like, and you would be able to couple that with, you could couple that with the cilantro or the Corona, or you could couple that with the lime, and you kind of create your own like small experience with these emoji and with these icons.
And we use emojis in texting
Yeah.
a lot, but they're kind of boring. As I'm looking at yours, I'm thinking, oh, how wonderful to enrich that whole choice.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and this project did come out of some personal frustration for me where, you know, I didn't have certain things that I wanted to communicate with. And I'm sure that, you know, everybody has their own version of, you know, I wish they had something for this. I'm sure some of you have probably said that quite a bit. You know, I wish they had a, you know, maybe
Yes.
a knitting emoji, or maybe a biker's emoji, or some, like a bunch of cooking emojis, or I don't know.
I
Yes.
had an email yesterday from a friend of mine, saying, I'm looking everywhere for a screaming emoji. She said, I want an emoji that shows somebody screaming.
But yeah, so this came out of some personal frustration, and so I saw the opportunity, and I was like, I want to create something that other people can connect with and other people can use to communicate with. And it's also helped me see this part of our language within society of, you know, how can I impact that aspect of how we communicate with each other.
So your next step is how to actually reach the people that this could be applied to. Do you have to have an agent or something like that, or can you go directly to those corporations that might vet something like this?
That process is, I have thought about how to go about that. Even though at this point I'm technically still in like the creation stage where I just make them. I have thought ahead a little bit, but haven't quite figured out some of that part of the process. Because I could go where, you know, I could do it all by myself and just have people crowdfund it, or I could approach some entity that would pay for it in full and actually take care of it for me. As far as which way that'll happen, essentially we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. But you know, as my main goal is to get this on people's phones or whatever people use to communicate with, that they can actually have new experiences.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Get the emails of everybody in here, so when you're ready to present them, you can let us know and we can buy it.
Yeah.
Are you aware, speaking of communication, of the U.S. postage stamps that have the Mexican food on them? I get hungry every time I put the tamale stamp up.
You should send me some of those, and I will be just as hungry. Yes.
They could be used when you mail something. Generally, I stick a seal on the back of it. You lick the envelope and it doesn't
Yeah.
stick. I put a seal on it, and those little things would be great
Yeah.
as stamps
Yeah.
back.
What about a casino?
Oh, like a slot?
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
And so what is the medium that you've used to create this? What paints, what kind of approach to drawing?
Yeah, so on some of these, I did have to write out a list ahead of time of like, oh, these could be ones that I do. And as I complete the list, you know, the next part of the process would be, some of them do require a little bit of